Imagine this. There was a time when your child couldn't go a day without talking to you. They told you everything: what happened at school, who they played with, what made them laugh, what made them cry. You were their safe place, their first thought, their constant connection. And then something changed, not suddenly in a dramatic way, but quietly, subtly. They started sharing less, answering with fewer words, spending more time alone, closing doors, avoiding conversations, and no matter how much you try to reach them, it feels like they are slowly slipping away. For many parents, this moment is confusing, painful, sometimes even frightening, because it can feel like rejection, like something is broken, like the connection that once felt so natural is disappearing. But psychology tells us something important. When a child distances themselves, it is rarely random, and it is almost never without reason. Distance is not always about pushing you away. Sometimes, it is about protecting something inside them. To understand this shift, we need to look beneath the behavior, because distance is not the message. It is the result of something deeper. Children don't wake up one day and decide to disconnect. Distance builds, slowly, through repeated experiences, through patterns, through moments that may seem small, but carry emotional weight. Sometimes, the change begins when a child feels misunderstood, not in one big moment, but in many small ones. Moments where they tried to express something and felt dismissed. Moments where they opened up and felt corrected too quickly. Moments where they needed understanding, but received advice instead. At first, they may try again. They speak again. They explain again. But if the pattern continues, something shifts. They begin to protect themselves. They begin to think, maybe it's better if I don't say anything. And slowly, they stop sharing. Not because they don't have anything to say, but because they no longer feel safe saying it. There is a quiet difference between being heard and feeling understood. A child can hear your response, but still feel unseen, because understanding is not just about listening to words. It's about acknowledging emotions. It's about recognizing what the child is trying to express beneath the surface. When a child feels misunderstood repeatedly, they don't always argue. They don't always react loudly. Sometimes they withdraw, silently, because distance feels easier than trying to explain something that isn't being received. Another reason children distance themselves is the feeling of being judged. Children are highly sensitive to tone, to facial expressions, to subtle reactions. Even when words are neutral, tone can carry meaning. A raised eyebrow, a sigh, a change in voice. These small signals can feel like criticism, and over time, they create emotional pressure. The child begins to anticipate judgment. They begin to think, if I say this, I'll be criticized. If I share this, I'll be corrected. If I open up, I'll be misunderstood. So they choose distance, because distance feels safer than judgment. There are also moments when children feel that their emotions are not taken seriously, when they express frustration, sadness, or fear, and hear responses like, "It's not a big deal. You're overreacting. You'll be fine." These responses may come from a place of reassurance, but to the child, they can feel dismissive, because what they are feeling is real to them. And when those feelings are minimized, they begin to hide them, not because the feelings disappear, but because they don't feel valid enough to share. Over time, this creates emotional isolation. They carry their emotions alone, even when they are not physically alone. There is another layer to this. Children are constantly developing their identity. As they grow, they begin to ask deeper questions. Who am I? What do I believe? What do I like? How am I different from my parents? This process requires space. It requires exploration. And sometimes, distance becomes part of that process, not because they want to disconnect, but because they are trying to understand themselves. Psychologists often describe this as a natural stage of development, especially during adolescence. It is a process of separation, not rejection, a way of building independence. But even in this natural process, the way parents respond matters deeply, because forced closeness can feel suffocating, while supportive space can feel empowering. Another important factor is emotional safety. Children open up when they feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. Safety means they can express thoughts without fear of being judged, without fear of being dismissed, without fear of being corrected immediately. When that safety is present, connection grows naturally. But when it is missing, distance becomes a coping mechanism, a way to avoid discomfort, a way to protect vulnerability. Sometimes, distance is not about what is happening at home. It is about what is happening outside. School pressure, friendship struggles, social comparison, insecurities. These experiences create emotional weight, and children don't always know how to process it. So they carry it, quietly, and when they come home, instead of opening up, they retreat. Because they are overwhelmed, because they don't know how to explain what they feel, because putting it into words feels too difficult. In these moments, distance is not rejection. It is emotional overload. There are also times when children feel that they are only noticed when something is wrong, when most interactions revolve around correction. Do this. Don't do that. Why didn't you? Even if these statements are necessary, if they become the dominant form of communication, something begins to shift. The child begins to associate interaction with criticism instead of connection, so they withdraw, not out of defiance, but out of self-protection, because distance reduces the chance of feeling criticized. Another subtle reason children distance themselves is the feeling of not being accepted for who they are. When they feel pressure to meet expectations, to behave a certain way, to follow a specific path, even if it doesn't align with who they are becoming, they may begin to hide parts of themselves, their thoughts, their interests, their personality. And when a child hides parts of themselves, distance naturally follows, because true connection requires authenticity, and authenticity requires acceptance. There is something else happening beneath the surface. The way you respond to your child becomes their internal voice. If they are met with patience, they learn patience. If they are met with understanding, they learn self-understanding. But if they are met with criticism or dismissal, they may begin to internalize those responses. They may begin to judge themselves, doubt themselves, and in that internal struggle, they may distance themselves not just from you, but from connection itself. As children grow older, their need for independence increases. They begin to value privacy, personal space, autonomy, and sometimes what feels like distance is actually growth. A natural shift from dependence to independence. But the difference between healthy independence and emotional disconnection lies in the presence of trust. If the child feels trusted, the distance feels balanced. If they feel controlled or monitored, the distance can become resistance. Because autonomy is a basic psychological need, and when that need is restricted, frustration builds, sometimes quietly, sometimes visibly. There are moments when a child feels overwhelmed, but doesn't want to show weakness, especially as they grow older. They may feel pressure to appear strong, independent, in control. So instead of expressing vulnerability, they withdraw. Because distance feels like control. It feels like protection. It feels like maintaining strength, even if internally they are struggling. It is important to understand that distance is not always a sign of lost love. Often, it is a sign of unexpressed emotion, of unmet needs, of misunderstood experiences, of internal changes that the child does not yet know how to communicate. And sometimes, distance is not about you, but about what the child is going through within themselves. So how do you respond to this distance? Not by forcing closeness, not by demanding answers, not by pushing harder, because pressure can increase distance. Instead, connection often returns through consistency, through calm presence, through small, repeated signals that say, "I'm here. You can talk to me. I'm not here to judge you." Sometimes saying less creates more space for connection. Sometimes patience communicates more than questions. Sometimes simply being available is enough. Rebuilding connection does not happen instantly. It happens gradually, through trust, through emotional safety, through moments where the child feels understood without needing to explain everything perfectly. And often, the most powerful thing you can do is create an environment where your child does not feel pressured to open up, but feels safe enough to. At the end of the day, children don't distance themselves because they stop caring. They distance themselves because something inside them has changed. Something feels different. Something feels difficult to express. And distance becomes the language they use when words are not enough. One day your child may come back, not in the same way as before, but in a new way, a more mature way, a deeper way. And when that moment comes, what matters is not how much distance existed, but whether the space between you still felt safe to return to. Because connection is not about constant closeness. It is about consistent safety. It is about knowing that no matter how far they go, There is always a place they can return to, without fear, without judgment, without needing to be perfect, and that place can always be you.